So as I sit down to record this podcast, the date is Friday, June the 4th, 2022. So tomorrow night is going to be Saturday, June 5th, 2022. That happens to be the day that Alexander Volkov and Jairzinho however you pronounce it, Rozenstruik, are going to draw in. They're going to draw in against each other within the octagon in the UFC Apex in Las Vegas, in a fight that is going to mean an awful lot to what the heavyweight division is going to look like going forward. Because as it just so happens right now, it's a little tough to say whether or not this division actually still has a champion. I mean, of course, on paper, the division does have a champion. That champion is Francis Ngannou. But it's a little bit unclear as to when exactly Ngannou is going to fight again. It's actually entirely clear on whether or not, if Ngannou fights again, whether or not it's going to even be for the UFC. Or if maybe he's going to find a way to get out of his contract, or let his contract expire while he heals up from his knee surgery that he has either recently had or is planning to have. And then, of course, even beyond that, everybody's looking forward to that Francis Ngannou versus Tyson Fury super fight, which personally I think, given how powerful Tyson Fury is within the world of combat sports, I think that fight will happen. It doesn't matter. It will either happen. It'll either happen over Dana White's dead body, or it won't. But I'm pretty confident that it's going to happen. So then in the meantime, we have to answer ourselves one little question, that is going to be, who is going to be the UFC heavyweight champion of the world? And recent rumors indicate that we might actually just establish ourselves an interim champion. Recent rumored news, I mean, nothing that I would really consider to be confirmed just as of yet, suggesting that Jon Jones is going to make his debut in the heavyweight division against former champion and the, by the marketing, greatest heavyweight in history, Stipe Miocic, for the interim UFC heavyweight championship of the world. And as skeptical as I tend to be about interim championships, this does seem to be one that the company is actually going to need. The one that they put around Cyril Gane's waist was definitely suffering for legitimacy based on really what that whole thing was actually over. It was over a disagreement about whether or not Francis Ngannou would fight within, literally, the difference was 30 days. And they were looking at an interim champion. But now with Francis Ngannou looking like he's going to be gone for God only knows how long, yeah, okay, it does look like the UFC is going to need an interim champion. This one is definitely going to be a lot more legitimate than the last one. And so then the question becomes, who's that champion going to be? But even more than that, I think that the question that we should be asking, who should even be fighting for this championship? And in this last week, talking with Ariel Helwani, Rozenstruik was absolutely clear when he what he thinks of it. He doesn't think that an interim championship fight between Jon Jones and Stipe Miocic is even fair. Because as much as Jon Jones accomplished at the light heavyweight division, I mean, as tainted as a lot of those accomplishments really are, given some of the issues that he had related to PEDs, I mean, he did manage to accomplish those things. They do still look very good on paper, but here's the thing, is that they were all at light heavyweight. He hasn't earned anything at heavyweight. And Biggie Boy is absolutely correct when he points out that, there are a lot of guys who have been just battling and fighting it out in this heavyweight division for years, who can definitely say that they have a better claim to having earned that spot, that berth in that interim championship fight than Jon Jones has. And actually, Rozenstruik, I think, is definitely one of those fighters. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think that Rozenstruik is the first guy that I would look at in the heavyweight division Far from it. I mean, he's had a very good career. He's a very good striker. Can be a very exciting fighter to watch. Sometimes not so much. So I wouldn't rule him out. But there are all sorts of guys who have definitely done far more to deserve that. I mean, Tai Tuivasa. Right then and there's a guy who has definitely earned an opportunity to fight for a heavyweight championship. Meanwhile, Jon Jones has been active for, if not more than at least close to 2 years now. Hasn't even fought in 2 years. If he even came back at light heavyweight, you wouldn't be able to say that he would have earned a championship fight at light heavyweight. And at heavyweight, he's done absolutely nothing. He didn't even have his grappling match with Jake Hager that he got everybody so excited about, including myself. So there is absolutely nothing there to suggest that he's the guy that deserves to fight for an interim heavyweight championship. But then, of course, we rewind this back another week, and let's look back at all the things that we had to say about Sugar Sean O'Malley. This idea that Sean O'Malley could actually go on to fight all these fights on pay-per-view against basically, a bunch of schlubs. Some of them very tough, very talented schlubs, but, compared to the other guys in the sport, in the division that could be fighting on pay-per-view, basically schlubs. All of this while the UFC was protecting him from any kind of serious competition, and that is because, as much as we hate to admit it, no, really, the UFC is not a meritocracy. We like to pretend that the UFC is a meritocracy. We like to think that these fighters, at least earn the opportunities, like the competitive opportunities that they've earned, that they deserve. I mean, if not the money, at the very least they're earning their competitive opportunities. Unless, of course, your name happens to be Sean O'Malley or Jon Jones, in which case everything just kind of gets served up to you on a silver platter. It doesn't matter if you've done anything for the past 2 years. Although, of course, that does bring us back to the detail that, let's face it, UFC and MMA in general, and combat sports in general, it is a sport, but really more than that, it's a business. It's the hurt business, but it's a business. Which really means that you can get a long way off of the back of just one thing: proven marketability. And while I would say that, Sean O'Malley, he likes to boast about how marketable he thinks he is. We've never seen him have to actually sell his own fight on pay-per-view. We've never even seen him have to sell a fight on free TV yet. Like a main event fight on a UFC fight night, we don't even really know if he can do that, and frankly, we don't really have any great indication as to whether or not he's actually a pay-per-view draw. But we do know that about Jon Jones. There's the old adage about the fighter that people will pay to see. And I think that in Jon Jones' case, there's a lot of people out there who will definitely pay to see him in the sense that they just kind of want to see him get beat. So they're kind of tired of all the shenanigans, kind of tired of all the PEDs, the criminal charges, the domestic assault, all of that stuff, and they just kind of want to see him. They just kind of want to see him get knocked out. And honestly, to his credit, as tainted as a lot of those wins are, we haven't seen it yet. But the fact remains that, even if it's only to see him get beat, people will pay to see a Jon Jones fight. Would people pay to see a Rozenstruik fight? That is definitely a little bit harder to say. We've definitely never seen people put into a situation where they have to decide whether or not they would pay to see that fight. And maybe in Dana White's eyes, the fact that people will definitely pay to see a Jon Jones fight is enough of an argument to say that he deserves that fight and Rozenstruik doesn't. But I don't think that Biggie Boy is at all wrong to say that quite frankly, it's not fair. It sounds a little bit childish in the world of combat sports, because it's not really supposed to be about what's fair. It's really supposed to be about what you can take. And if Biggie Boy really does think that he could take the heavyweight championship of the world, well, this upcoming weekend, he's got a fantastic chance to prove it. All he needs to do is beat Alexander Volkov. Now, admittedly, that's easier said than done.